You're watching the mayoral debate for the city of Abbotsford, and right back to Charlie Smith with a question for Bruce Banman.
Mayor Banman, one of the roles of a mayor is to hold senior staff accountable on behalf of the public. We're in a situation in Abbotsford where your competitor, his son, is actually the Director of Development Planning and an approving officer. First of all, I'm wondering, is that a concern for you? And secondly, beyond the issue of Mr. Braun's son, is what would you tell voters that you will do to ensure that you'll be on their side and not necessarily only on the side of the staff?
Well, you know, I first have to say that when it comes to Councillor Braun's son, he performs his duties, and he's one of the better staff members that we have. He works very diligently at his job. I have the utmost respect for the job that he does. However, this issue is not new. It's been brought to us many times. Technically, there is no conflict of interest legally. However, there are those in the community that are troubled by this. They're very much troubled, and I know what the influence and the power of the mayor's position has. And there are those out there that just say this does not pass the common sense test. And while there may not be a legal reason for this to be a true conflict of interest, I would remind people that when we come up with decisions, it's based after there's been a problem, not prior.
Thank you very much. Mr. Braun?
Well, to suggest that there's a conflict with my son is ridiculous. He is 3 levels down. If he was a city manager, I would agree with the mayor, and I wouldn't be if he was a city manager, I wouldn't be running for the mayor. He was there long before I arrived, and we don't discuss city business. He doesn't ask me what's going around in the town council table. I don't ask him what's going on in the planning department. My conversations are always with the city manager. Any questions that I ask, I send to the city manager, not to any general manager. Or he's not a general manager, he's a director. But even the general manager level, which reports directly to the city manager, always go through the city manager. That's just been my habit. I understand what a conflict is. People have made this accusation in the last few months. It's interesting it never came up the 2 years and 9 months prior to that, so I think there's probably a little more going on here than meets the eye.
Thank you very much. We'll have 5 minutes of open debate. Charlie, could you repeat the latter part of your question?
Well, the other issue is holding senior staff accountable, and what assurances you can give voters that you're not just going to allow the staff to run the show and then the politicians are just there to rubber stamp whatever they want to do.
Thank you for asking that question. And I think my track record is pretty clear. There's been a good clearing of house that needed to be cleaned, and we had to improve our senior staff. And as a result of that, we were able to, without reducing services, deliver the first zero tax increase in over 18 years. Senior staff is accountable. We're far more transparent than we ever were. And I don't really want to get into the whole personal debate of Mr. Braun and his son, but I will say that many, many times the mayor has to go down into the organization and ask questions of staff members. And I think it just creates an awkwardness within the organization. It creates perceptions of favoritism that it would exist. I just think it's a bad idea. I think I can tell you what I would do is I would personally never do that to my relative or family member that's within an organization. I would never put them in that position to begin with. And I also think that there needs to be a look at what happens. Does this mean that he's now stuck at this certain level, that they're never going to have a discussion, that we now have a mayor that's not going to talk with a certain staff member ever? That just does not pass the common sense, and I think it creates an unnecessary impediment. Whether or not there's a conflict that exists aside, the fact that we now have this perceived conflict, I think, is problematic. But with regards to staff members and senior staff, they're held more accountable now than they've ever been held. You know, I worked very hard to get our current city manager to even consider coming to work for us. And as a result of that, we have turned the finances of the city around. We now not only gave a zero budget, but we were able to put over $10 million of surplus as well. We are well on the road to of correcting some of our finances and improving the transparency. We do far more public consultation than we have ever done before.
Well, we seem to be switching to the budget and zero. I keep hearing zero budget. It's interesting to me that when I arrived at City Hall, I actually made a motion for a 0% budget, which the mayor and the majority of council voted against. I did the same thing the second year. This year, we actually achieved the zero, thanks to our new city manager, and now I'm finding it interesting that everybody's championing a 0% budget. The people of Abbotsford could have had that 2 years earlier if they would have followed the motion that I
In all
made.
due respect, that
With
would have meant
respect-
we would have had to lay off a bunch of police officers in order to be able to achieve that zero budget, because
That
when
is
we
what the
hired,
former city manager
when we
said.
hired police officers, they get hired at 65% of full-time pay. And there's an escalation that we were stuck with that both of us inherited, that it would have meant the layoff of police officers, and I don't think that was wise.
So we achieved it, and we didn't lay anybody off. So that's the point I'm trying to make. The fact that my son works there, and the fact that the mayor says he goes down to three levels down to the staff is problematic. Council's function is governance and policy. Once we make a policy, the city manager carries out that policy, especially if he doesn't agree with the policy. That is his function. So I make it a habit. I don't go down to anybody. That's not my job. I will go to, if there's a taxpayer that wants to, has an issue that wants to go either to the planning department or the engineering department or Parks and Rec, I will take them to that floor, leave them at the counter, make the introduction, and let the staff do what they're supposed to do, which is
And the difference
carry out
between
their
Mr.
job.
Braun and I is that I understand that many times you have to go seek information, and we are allowed, even council is allowed, to go seek information from any staff member. What we're not allowed to do is direct. What the direction comes is you come back up to the city manager and say, you know what, there's a problem here as I see it. Can you look into that, please? And can you correct what I deem to be a problem? Come back to me, let me know if I'm correct, let me know if I'm wrong, but there seems to be an issue here. You have to be able to burrow down, because if all you're going to do is rely on the city manager for information, I say that that is problematic, and I say that that's the way that we got into problems in the past, is we didn't ask respectful, intelligent questions of our staff members that were on the front line or in any level of the government or in the organization.
You're mischaracterizing what I said. I didn't say that the city manager had to go get me all the information. If I have a court request about engineering, I send it to the city manager, who then sends it off to the appropriate staff person in the engineering department to get me that information. I do that all the time. I have been doing a lot of digging and getting to the bottom of our financial situation right through this whole 3 years, the water, lots of other issues that have only come to light because the fact that I did my homework and dug down. But it wasn't through the staff, it was through the proper channel,
Thank
which was
you
the
very
city
much.
manager.
Thank you, candidates. Let's take another break.